Our story begins not with destiny fulfilled, but with destiny approaching like a storm on the horizon. In the world of Final Fantasy VII, beneath the gleaming towers of corporate power and above the desperate slums where hope struggles to survive, there exists a tale of heroism that was always meant to end in tragedy. This is the story of Zack Fair, a young warrior whose fate was sealed before his journey even began, whose every step forward was also a step toward an ending that could not be changed, no matter how brightly his spirit burned or how fiercely he fought against the darkness closing in around him. Crisis Core. Final Fantasy VII is a prequel, a bridge between innocence and catastrophe, taking us back 7 years before the events that would shake the planet to its core. It tells us how heroes are made and how they are broken, how dreams can inspire and how truth can destroy, how the bonds we forge with others become the legacy we leave behind when everything else has been taken from us. This is a story where knowing the ending does not diminish the journey, but rather amplifies every moment, every choice, every smile and laugh and act of kindness, because we understand what these characters cannot, that time is running out and nothing can stop what is coming. The world we enter is one dominated by the Shinra Electric Power Company, a mega corporation that has grown beyond mere business into something approaching a nation unto itself, controlling resources and wielding influence that dwarfs most governments. Shinra's power comes from Mako energy, the life force of the planet itself, which they extract from reactors built across the world and convert into electricity that fuels modern civilization. This energy glows with an eerie green light, beautiful and terrible in equal measure, representing both progress and exploitation, the price of comfort measured in the slow death of the world beneath our feet. At the pinnacle of Shinra's military might stands Soldier, an elite fighting force whose members are far more than ordinary warriors. Through exposure to concentrated Mako energy and injection with cells from an entity called Genova, Soldier operatives undergo enhancement that transforms them into something superhuman, granting them incredible strength, speed, reflexes, and combat prowess that allows one trained operative to defeat dozens of regular soldiers. The process leaves its mark, turning the eyes of those who undergo it into a distinctive glowing blue-green, a visible sign that they have been changed at the fundamental level, no longer quite human, but something more, something other. Soldier operates under a strict hierarchy, divided into 3 classes. Third class represents the entry level, soldiers still training and proving themselves worthy of greater responsibility. Second-class members have demonstrated skill and dedication, earning more challenging assignments and greater autonomy. And at the apex stand the first, class operatives, legendary warriors whose names are known across the world, whose combat abilities approach the mythical, who represent the absolute best that Shinra's enhancement program can produce. Among the general population, first-class soldier members are viewed as heroes, celebrities whose exploits in combat against Shinra's enemies inspire admiration and awe, though few understand the true cost of the power they wield. Into this world of corporate might and superhuman soldiers comes a young man named Zack Fair, and from the moment we meet him, everything about him radiates energy and enthusiasm. He is not world-weary or cynical, not brooding or damaged by past trauma, but rather impossibly, infectiously optimistic, someone who approaches life with a puppy-like eagerness that his peers find both endearing and occasionally exasperating. Zack comes from Gongaga, a small village far from Midgar's urban sprawl, and he joined Soldier with a dream burning bright in his heart, the simple, pure desire to become a hero, to help people, to make a difference in the world. That dream might seem naive to those who have seen too much of the world's darkness, but there is nothing false or affected about Zack's idealism. He genuinely wants to do good, genuinely believes in the possibility of heroism, genuinely sees in Soldier an opportunity to protect those who cannot protect themselves. His personality is open and friendly, forming connections easily with almost everyone he meets, his natural charisma and caring nature, drawing people to him even when they might prefer to remain distant. He speaks with an earnestness that can seem almost childlike, wearing his heart on his sleeve in a way that makes him vulnerable, but also deeply authentic, impossible to ignore or dismiss as merely another ambitious soldier climbing the ranks. When our story opens, Zack holds the rank of second-class soldier, having already proven himself capable, but still striving toward that ultimate goal of achieving first-class status. He works under the mentorship of Angel Hewley, a first-class operative who serves as both instructor and guide, teaching Zack not just combat techniques, but the philosophy that should govern a warrior's life. The relationship between mentor and student forms the emotional foundation of Crisis Core's opening, establishing dynamics and lessons that will echo throughout everything that follows, shaping Zack's understanding of what it means to be a true hero. Angel Hewley cuts an imposing figure, tall and powerfully built, with an air of quiet strength that inspires confidence and respect. Unlike many first-class operatives who revel in their celebrity status or use their power for personal gain, Anil maintains a serious, almost stoic demeanor, approaching his duties with a sense of responsibility and honor that sets him apart from his peers. He believes deeply in the ideals that Soldier is supposed to represent, in the concept of using power to protect rather than dominate, of serving a cause greater than oneself. These beliefs inform everything he does, every decision he makes, every lesson he imparts to the young man under his guidance. The most visible symbol of Angel's philosophy is the massive sword he carries on his back at all times, a weapon so large and heavy that wielding it effectively requires superhuman strength. This is the Buster Sword, an iconic blade that would eventually pass through several hands and become legendary in its own right. But at this moment in time, it belongs to Angel and represents everything his family stood for. The sword was forged for him by his father, a craftsman who worked himself to exhaustion and debt to create this masterpiece as a gift when Angel joined Soldier. The elder Hewley poured his hopes and dreams into the weapon, imbuing it with the family's honor, and then worked himself to death, trying to pay off the expense of its creation. Because of this sacrifice, because of what the Buster Sword cost his father, Angel treats the weapon with almost religious reverence. He carries it everywhere but rarely uses it in actual combat, keeping it pristine and undamaged, a monument to his family's legacy rather than merely a tool of war. Instead, Angel fights with standard soldier-issue weapons, or even his bare hands, saving the Buster Sword for only the most crucial moments or keeping it sheathed entirely. This peculiarity becomes something his peers tease him about, and Zack, in particular, cannot quite understand why someone would possess such an impressive weapon and choose not to wield it. The answer, as Angel patiently explains time and again, lies in understanding what the sword represents. It is not just metal and craftsmanship, but the embodiment of dreams and honor, the physical manifestation of his father's love and sacrifice. To use it carelessly, to risk damage to it through casual combat, would be to dishonor his father's memory and everything the man struggled to provide. The Buster Sword must be preserved, must be protected, must be treated with the same care and respect one would show to the most precious treasure, because it is precious beyond mere monetary value, irreplaceable in ways that transcend the practical. Through this philosophy of preservation and honor, Angeal teaches Zack his most important lessons, summed up in phrases that the younger man will carry with him through everything that follows. Embrace your dreams, Angeal tells him repeatedly. If you want to be a hero, you need to have dreams and honor. These words become something like a mantra for Zack, guidance that shapes his understanding of what it means to be a soldier, what it means to fight for something beyond yourself, what it means to maintain your integrity even when the world tries to strip it away from you. Angeal gives Zack a nickname that perfectly captures the young man's personality and energy, calling him Zack the Puppy, a moniker that might seem diminishing but is actually delivered with affection and captures something essential about his student's nature. Like a puppy, Zack is energetic and enthusiastic, eager to please and quick to form attachments, loyal almost to a fault, possessing a kind of innocent joy in simply being alive and having the opportunity to help others. The comparison makes Zack slightly self-conscious, but he accepts it as he accepts most things, with good humor and the understanding that his mentor sees him clearly and cares for him regardless. Beyond his relationship with Zack, Angeal maintains close friendships with two other first-class operatives, bonds forged through shared experiences and mutual respect that stretch back years before our story begins. One of these friends is Sephiroth, a name that carries weight even among the legendary warriors of first class, a soldier whose combat prowess has become the stuff of myth and whose reputation extends far beyond Shinra's borders. Sephiroth is everything a soldier is supposed to be, disciplined and powerful, focused and effective, his silver hair and distinctive appearance making him instantly recognizable, his exploits in battle inspiring countless young men to join the military in hopes of achieving even a fraction of his capability. In these early days, before the darkness that will consume him has fully manifested, Sephiroth appears as a consummate professional, dedicated to his duties and respected by his peers. He carries himself with quiet confidence, never boastful but never uncertain, moving through the world with the assurance of someone who knows exactly what he is capable of and sees no need to prove it through empty displays. His relationship with Angeal is marked by mutual understanding, two warriors who recognize in each other a shared commitment to excellence and honor, who can communicate through glances and subtle gestures the way only those who have fought alongside each other in countless battles can manage. The third member of this trio of first-class operatives is Genesis Rhapsodos, and from our first encounter with him, it becomes clear that he is markedly different from his companions. Where Sephiroth is reserved and Angeal is earnest, Genesis is flamboyant and theatrical, possessing an arrogant edge that manifests in his speech and bearing. He dresses in distinctive red leather, carries himself with deliberate dramatic flair, and has an obsessive relationship with a work of literature called Loveless, an epic poem that he quotes constantly, seeing in its verses parallels to his own life and using its imagery to frame his understanding of the world around him. Genesis and Angeal share a history that predates their service in Soldier, having grown up together in a small village called Benora. Despite coming from different economic backgrounds, the two became close friends, both eventually leaving their rural home to join Shinra's military and climb the ranks together. Their friendship with Sephiroth developed later during their time in Soldier, forming a legendary triumvirate of first-class operatives whose combined skill and power represented the absolute pinnacle of what Shinra's enhancement program could produce. The story truly begins with a training simulation in soldier headquarters, a virtual reality combat scenario where Zack faces off against holographic enemies, testing his skills against simulated threats. The exercise is designed to push operatives to their limits, and Zack handles the initial waves of opponents with impressive efficiency, his combat style already showing the foundation of skill that will eventually make him one of Soldier's finest. But the simulation includes a twist, a final challenge in the form of a virtual Sephiroth, and here Zack's abilities prove insufficient. The legendary warrior defeats him almost casually, demonstrating the vast gulf that still exists between a promising second-class operative and a true first-class legend. Angeal aborts the simulation before it can continue, and in the aftermath, we see the relationship between mentor and student in full display. Rather than berating Zack for his failure, Angeal offers encouragement and perspective, reminding him that growth comes through challenge and that recognizing one's current limitations is the first step toward transcending them. He delivers his signature advice about dreams and honor, setting the philosophical foundation that will guide Zack through everything that follows, planting seeds that will eventually grow into the core of the young man's identity. As they leave the training facility and make their way through soldier headquarters, the atmosphere shifts from the familiar rhythms of training and preparation to something more urgent. They are summoned to the office of Lazar Ducericus, the director of Soldier, a man whose role places him at the intersection of military operations and corporate politics, responsible for managing the organization's most valuable assets while navigating the complex power structures within Shinra. Lazard presents himself as a career bureaucrat, efficient and professional, concerned primarily with maintaining operational effectiveness and ensuring that Soldier continues to serve Shinra's interests across the world. The news Lazard delivers strikes at the heart of Soldier's cohesion and reveals the first cracks in what appeared to be an unassailable organization. Genesis Rhapsodos has disappeared, along with a significant number of other Soldier operatives of various ranks. The director's briefing treats this as a desertion, a betrayal of the trust and investment Shinra has placed in these enhanced warriors, and the implications are staggering. Soldier members do not simply walk away from their duties. The enhancement process, the training, the access to classified information and dangerous technology, all of these factors make desertion not just a personal choice, but a potential threat to Shinra's security and interests. For Angeal, the news cuts deeper than mere operational concern. Genesis is not just a fellow soldier or a respected colleague, but a childhood friend, someone with whom he has shared history stretching back to their earliest days in Benora. The idea that Genesis would betray Shinra, would abandon his post and his comrades, seems incomprehensible. Angeal struggles to reconcile what he knows of his friend's character with this apparent defection, searching for alternative explanations, for some context that would make sense of actions that appear senseless on their face. But there is little time for contemplation or investigation. Shinra's war with the nation of Wutai has reached a critical juncture, and soldier operatives are needed on the front lines immediately. Lazard assigns Angeal and Zack to Fort Tamblin, a strategic location where the final confrontation with Wutai forces is expected to occur. Before they depart, Angeal delivers news that fills Zack with pride and renewed determination. The mentor has recommended his student for promotion to first class, recognition that Zack's skills and dedication have reached the level where he deserves to stand among Soldier's elite. The promotion is not yet official, still requiring approval through proper channels, but Angeal's recommendation carries significant weight, and barring unforeseen complications, Zack's dream of achieving first-class status moves from distant aspiration to imminent reality. The journey to Wutai provides time for conversation and reflection, moments where the relationship between mentor and student deepens through shared confidences and casual exchanges. Angel speaks of his hometown, of Banora and the apples that grow there, a variety unique to that region called dumb apples or Banora whites. He describes them with a fondness that suggests these simple fruits carry meaning beyond their taste, representing home and simpler times, connections to a past before enhancement and war, and all the complications that come with being a legendary warrior in a corporation's military force. He tells Zack about the largest dumb apple tree in Banora, how it grew on the estate of a wealthy family, how the apples from that particular tree were rumored to taste better than any others. But Angel never stole from that tree, never took what he could have easily claimed, because the wealthy family's son was his friend. Even in poverty, even when hungry, honor mattered more than immediate need. Honor could be a burden, Angel admits, something that made life harder when easier paths presented themselves. But even with that burden, he had his pride, his sense of self-worth that came from knowing he lived according to his principles rather than his appetites. These stories and philosophies create a portrait of Angel as someone fundamentally decent, grounded by values that predate his enhancement and service to Shinra, someone who has managed to maintain his essential character despite everything the world has thrown at him. For Zack, absorbing these lessons and trying to understand what they mean for his own path forward, Angel represents an ideal of what a soldier should be, not just in terms of combat capability, but in terms of moral character, the kind of person you want to become when power is placed in your hands. Their arrival at the Wutai front brings them immediately into combat operations. The conflict between Shinra and Wutai has been ongoing for some time, a war of expansion and resistance where Shinra's superior resources and military might are being deployed to subjugate a nation that refuses to surrender its autonomy. Fort Tamblin represents a key strategic position, and Zack and Angel's mission is to support the final push that will break Wutai's remaining resistance and secure Shinra's dominance in the region. The combat itself showcases what enhanced soldier operatives can accomplish on the battlefield. Zack moves through Wutai forces with a speed and power that would be impossible for an ordinary human, his sword cutting through opponents with devastating efficiency, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to react to threats before they fully materialize. This is what soldier training and Mako enhancement produce. Warriors who can turn the tide of battle through sheer individual prowess, whose presence on the field is worth entire squads of conventional troops. But in the midst of this mission, complications arise that transform what should be a straightforward military operation into something far more troubling. Zack encounters creatures that should not exist on a conventional battlefield, massive beasts summoned through some kind of magic or technology that he does not immediately recognize. These summons, entities of tremendous power drawn from the planet's mythology and energy, attack indiscriminately, devastating both Wutai defenders and Shinra forces alike. Their presence suggests that someone with significant capability and resources is interfering with the operation, and when Zack catches glimpses of the one responsible, he sees a figure in distinctive red leather, immediately recognizable despite the chaos of combat. Genesis has not simply deserted. He has taken action against Shinra, actively working to undermine their military objectives, wielding power that rivals or exceeds what Zack himself can bring to bear. The implications are staggering. A first-class soldier turning against the corporation using his enhanced abilities and combat prowess to attack the very organization that created him, represents a threat that Shinra cannot afford to ignore. Genesis knows too much, has too much power, poses too great a risk to be allowed to operate freely. His actions transform him from deserter to active enemy, someone who must be hunted down and neutralized before he can do irreparable damage to Shinra's interests and operations. Zack pursues the fleeting figure through the chaos of battle, trying to close distance and confront the one responsible for this interference. But Genesis remains frustratingly elusive, appearing and disappearing like a phantom, accomplishing his objectives and vanishing before any meaningful confrontation can occur. The mission concludes with strategic success for Shinra, but personal confusion for Zack, who cannot understand why someone of Genesis's stature would throw away everything for reasons that remain completely opaque. The encounter plants questions that will not be easily answered, mysteries that hint at deeper truths Zack does not yet possess the context to understand. Why would Genesis betray Soldier and Shinra? What could possibly motivate such a dramatic turn? And where is Angel in all of this? The mentor has been strangely absent during critical moments, his explanations vague, his demeanor suggesting knowledge he is not sharing with his student. The foundations of certainty that supported Zack's understanding of his world are beginning to crack, though he does not yet realize how extensively they will crumble. Returning from Wutai brings no respite or clarity. Lazard has new orders, sending Zack on a mission to investigate the very place where both Angel and Genesis originated, the village of Benora, where childhood friendships were forged, and where answers might be found about what drove Genesis to his betrayal. Zack travels there with Tseng, a member of the Turks, Shinra's elite covert operations unit. The Turks handle the tasks too sensitive or too dirty for Soldier, operating in shadows where Soldier works in spotlight, their methods often including assassination, kidnapping, espionage, and other activities that cannot be publicly acknowledged. Tseng himself is professional and efficient, his demeanor suggesting a man who has seen too much to be easily shocked, but who still performs his duties with meticulous attention to detail. Benora proves to be a small, quiet village, the kind of place that seems untouched by the conflicts and complications of the larger world. Apple orchards stretch across the landscape, the famous dumb-apple trees that Angel spoke of with such fondness, and the peaceful agricultural setting creates stark contrast with the violence and chaos that have characterized recent events. This is where Angel grew up, where he and Genesis played as children, where the roots of their friendship were planted in soil that seems innocent of the darkness that would later grow from it. Zack meets Gillian Hewley, Angel's mother, an older woman living alone in a modest home at the edge of the village. She receives her visitor with warmth tinged with sadness, a mother's instinctive concern for a son she has not seen in far too long, mixing with resignation about the path her child has chosen. In conversation with Gillian, Zack learns more about the Buster Sword and what it meant to Angel's family, how his father worked himself to death, creating that weapon, how Angel has honored that sacrifice by preserving the sword rather than risking it in casual combat. The story deepens Zack's understanding of his mentor's philosophy, adding texture and emotional weight to lessons that might otherwise seem abstract. But beneath Benora's pastoral surface lies something far more sinister. Exploration of the area reveals a hidden Shinra facility built beneath the village, a secret research complex whose very existence raises immediate questions about Shinra's interest in this remote location. Inside the underground laboratories, Zack discovers evidence of experiments, documentation of something called Project G, references to genetic manipulation and enhancement that predate the soldier program he is familiar with. The facility appears to have been abandoned recently, equipment left behind in what looks like hasty evacuation, but the purpose of the research conducted here is not immediately clear from the scattered records and deactivated machinery. Deeper in the facility, Zack encounters Genesis directly, no longer a fleeting figure glimpsed through chaos, but face to face in a confrontation that cannot be avoided. The red-clad warrior appears unchanged physically, but transformed in demeanor, his arrogance now carrying an edge of bitterness, his theatrical quotations from Loveless taking on darker meaning. He speaks in riddles and metaphors drawn from his beloved epic poem, comparing soldier members to monsters, suggesting that what Shinra has created is not heroes but abominations, that the enhancement process that grants power also strips away humanity in ways that cannot be easily perceived or measured. Genesis accuses Shinra of crimes that Zack does not fully understand, speaking of experimentation and manipulation, of being used as test subjects without consent or knowledge, of discovering truths that shatter the comfortable narratives that soldier members tell themselves about who they are and what they represent. His words carry conviction born of personal experience, and though his manner is theatrical and his explanations cryptic, underneath the performance lies genuine anguish, real anger at perceived betrayal. This is not simply a warrior who has chosen a different path, but someone who feels they have been fundamentally wronged, whose entire understanding of their identity and purpose has been undermined by discoveries they can no longer ignore or accept. Before Zack can extract clear answers or understand the full context of Genesis's accusations, the confrontation is interrupted by an arrival that changes everything. Angeal appears, but not in the way Zack expects. The mentor's entrance reveals something impossible, something that violates everything Zack understands about biology and identity. Angeal has sprouted a single wing from his left shoulder, a massive appendage of white feathers that should not and cannot exist on a human body, that marks him as having undergone some transformation far beyond what standard soldier enhancement produces. The revelation stuns Zack into momentary paralysis. His mentor, the man he looks up to above almost anyone else, the person whose philosophies of honor and dreams have shaped his understanding of what it means to be a hero, has been keeping secrets of the most profound kind. Angeal is not simply what he appears, not merely a dedicated soldier operative who happens to be skilled and principled. He is something else, something Shinra created through experimentation that goes far beyond anything Zack was told about when he volunteered for enhancement. The confrontation in the underground facility ends without clear resolution. Genesis departs with his characteristic dramatic flair. Angeal follows without explanation, and Zack is left with more questions than answers, his certainties about his mentor and about Soldier itself badly shaken. But before he can process what he has witnessed or pursue those who have fled, Shinra makes its own move with brutal efficiency. Orders come down from the highest levels. Banora is to be destroyed, completely and utterly, erased as though it never existed. Military aircraft appear in the sky above the peaceful village, and what follows is massacre masquerading as military necessity. Bombs fall on orchards and homes, on the dumb apple trees that Angeal spoke of with such fondness, on the modest house where Gillian Hewley lives alone. The village is consumed by fire and explosive force, every building reduced to rubble, every tree burned to ash, the entire settlement obliterated in an afternoon of systematic destruction. Zack can only watch in horror as Shinra eliminates this place and likely everyone in it, covering up whatever secrets were housed in that underground facility, erasing evidence of Project G and whatever other experiments were conducted there. The callousness of the action shakes something fundamental in Zack's worldview. He has believed in Soldier as an organization dedicated to protection, has trusted that Shinra, despite its corporate nature, ultimately works toward goals that serve the greater good. But this is genocide dressed up as military expediency, the murder of civilians and destruction of their homes carried out to preserve corporate secrets and maintain deniability about illegal research. The organization Zack serves is capable of atrocity when it serves their interests, and that knowledge cannot be unknown or ignored, no matter how uncomfortable it makes him. Returning to Midgar after Benora's destruction, Zack finds himself promoted despite the mission's disturbing conclusion. Lazard officially elevates him to first-class soldier, recognizing his skill and dedication with the rank he has long aspired to achieve. Under different circumstances, this would be cause for celebration, the fulfillment of a dream he has held since childhood. But the promotion feels hollow, given what he has witnessed, tainted by association with events that reveal the darkness lurking beneath Soldier's heroic facade. Zack accepts the new rank because rejecting it would serve no purpose. But the shine has come off his idealism, the first permanent scars forming on his puppy-like enthusiasm. The celebration of his promotion is cut short by crisis. Genesis launches a direct assault on Midgar itself, bringing his army to Shinra's doorstep in an attack that cannot be ignored or written off as isolated incident in distant battlefields. Copies of Genesis, creatures that bear his appearance and abilities but lack something essential of his personality, flood into the city by the hundreds, attacking military installations and civilian areas with apparent randomness. These Genesis copies are an extension of his power, manifestations of the same ability that gave him his wing, products of genetic manipulation that allows him to create army from his own cells, each copy possessing a fraction of his capabilities but controlled by his will. Zack deploys immediately to defend the city, joining other soldier operatives in responding to incursions across multiple sectors. The fighting is chaotic and desperate. Genesis copies swarming through streets and buildings, forcing evacuations and threatening infrastructure. In Sector 8, during a sweep through the slums beneath Midgar's upper plate, Zack encounters a young Turk named Cisne, a woman whose competence and dedication mark her as one of Shinra's most capable covert operatives despite her youth. They fight alongside each other, an impromptu partnership formed by necessity, and in the chaos of combat, a mutual respect develops between soldier and Turk, two different parts of Shinra's military apparatus finding common ground in shared purpose. As Zack pursues Genesis copies through the sector, fate intervenes with an accident that will change his life in ways he cannot yet imagine. A building structure, weakened by combat and explosions, collapses as he pursues enemies across rooftops. He falls, plummeting from a height that would kill an ordinary person, his enhanced durability and reflexes the only things between him and certain death. By improbable chance, his fall is broken by the roof of an old church in the slums, a forgotten structure whose roof gives way under his impact, dropping him further to land in a bed of flowers growing impossibly in the darkness beneath Midgar's oppressive plate. He wakes disoriented, injured but alive, surrounded by yellow and white blooms that should not exist in a place where sunlight never reaches. Standing over him, concern evident in her expression, is a young woman with brown hair woven with a pink ribbon, green eyes that seem to see more than they should, wearing a pink dress that stands out against the drab surroundings of the slums. She introduces herself as Aerith Gainsborough, and her first words to him are gentle inquiry about his well-being, checking that his injuries are not serious, offering help without expectation of reward or recompense. The church is Aerith's special place, she explains. Somewhere she comes to tend the flowers that grow nowhere else in Midgar. The blooms are her pride and joy, proof that life can flourish even in the most unlikely places, that beauty can exist even when everything around it suggests otherwise. She speaks of the flowers with genuine affection, treating them not as mere plants, but as precious charges under her care, and there is something in her manner, in the way she moves through this space, that suggests deep connection to the life growing here, as though she understands the flowers in ways that go beyond mere horticultural knowledge. Zack is immediately taken with her, drawn by her warmth and openness in a world that has recently shown him so much darkness and deception. Their conversation is easy and natural, free from the complications and hidden agendas that seem to colour every other interaction in his life lately. Aerith treats him not as a first-class soldier, or a corporate weapon, or anything other than simply a person who fell through her roof and needs kindness. There is no calculation in her manner, no attempt to use or manipulate, just genuine human connection offered freely to a stranger who happened into her sanctuary. She tells him she is selling flowers, trying to make enough money to buy a flower wagon so she can bring her blooms to different parts of the city, spreading beauty and life to places that desperately need both. The dream is modest but heartfelt, and when Zack offers to help build the wagon for her, promising to make it happen when he has time between missions, Aerith's smile is radiant with genuine joy. They exchange information, promising to stay in touch, and as Zack leaves the church to return to his duties, something has shifted in him. In the midst of crisis and confusion, he has found a point of light, someone whose presence reminds him why he wanted to be a hero in the first place, why protecting people and making the world better matters more than corporate politics or military hierarchies. The assault on Midgar is eventually repelled, Genesis and his copies driven back, but not before significant damage is inflicted and hundreds of casualties are suffered. The attack demonstrates that Genesis is not merely a rogue operative, but a genuine threat, someone with the power and determination to strike at Shinra's heart. The corporation mobilizes its full resources to hunt him down, treating his elimination as highest priority. Soldier operatives are dispatched to various locations where Genesis has been sighted, or where intelligence suggests he might be operating. A worldwide manhunt for a warrior who seems always one step ahead of his pursuers. Zack finds himself assigned to tracking missions, following leads across continents, investigating reports that mostly turn out to be false or outdated by the time he arrives. Between these missions, he maintains contact with Aerith, visiting the church when he is in Midgar, helping her tend the flowers, and slowly building the flower wagon he promised to construct. These moments become refuges from the darkness of his work, brief interludes where he can be simply Zack, rather than soldier operative or Shinra's weapon. Aerith never asks about classified information or presses him for details about his missions. Content to exist in the present moment, sharing stories and laughter, and the simple pleasure of working together toward a common goal. Through their growing friendship, Zack learns that Aerith is not quite as ordinary as she first appeared. She lives with her adoptive mother, Elmira, in the Sector 5 slums, never knew her birth mother, who died when she was very young, and has spent her entire life under intermittent surveillance by Shinra's Turks. The corporation maintains interest in her for reasons Aerith does not fully understand, periodically attempting to bring her in for testing or observation, efforts she has so far evaded through a combination of cleverness and help from friends who warn her when agents are coming. She speaks of this as simply part of her life, an inconvenience rather than a source of fear. But Zack recognizes the reality of living constantly watched and periodically hunted as something far more serious than Aerith's cheerful manner suggests. He does not connect these facts to larger patterns yet, does not realize that Aerith's uniqueness might relate to the experiments and genetic manipulation that have become recurring themes in his investigations. For now, she is simply someone who makes him smile, whose presence reminds him of goodness in a world that increasingly seems defined by corruption and exploitation. The flower wagon takes shape slowly over multiple visits. Zack's engineering skills adequate to the task, even if carpentry is not his specialty. And when it is finally complete, Aerith's delight makes every minute of work worthwhile. The hunt for Genesis leads Zack to Nibelheim, a remote town in icy northern regions, following intelligence that suggests the rogue soldier has established a base of operations there. The mission is considered high priority, and multiple operatives are assigned, including Zack and 2 other soldier members. They infiltrate the snowy town, fighting through Genesis copies and hostile forces that have entrenched themselves in the area, pushing toward the central facility where Genesis himself is believed to be, coordinating his activities. Inside that facility, Zack encounters Dr. Hollander, a Shinra scientist whose name has appeared in fragments of documentation related to Project G, but whose role has never been clearly explained. Hollander is fleeing Shinra, having thrown his lot in with Genesis, and when confronted, the scientist provides pieces of the puzzle that begin to make terrible sense. He rants about recognition and credit, about being overshadowed by Professors Hojo, about his work on Project G being dismissed and suppressed, while Hojo's rival Project S or C received all funding and attention. In his bitterness and wounded pride, Hollander reveals truths about Genesis's origins and nature. Genesis is not merely a soldier operative enhanced through standard procedures. He is a product of Project G, an experimental program that predated the soldier enhancement process, one that involved genetic manipulation in the womb, infusing fetuses with cells from an entity called Genova, in attempts to create beings with superhuman abilities. Genesis was one such experiment, created through Hollander's work, his cells modified before birth, to incorporate Genova's genetic material. The process granted him abilities beyond what normal soldier enhancement could achieve, but it also made him fundamentally unstable, his body slowly breaking down on a cellular level in a process called degradation. The degradation is killing Genesis, his enhanced cells deteriorating and taking his body with them. The copies he creates are attempts to find a cure, each one a potential solution to the genetic problem slowly destroying him. His betrayal of Shinra stems from this desperation, from the corporation's refusal to prioritize finding a cure for the very condition their experiments created. Genesis is not simply power-mad or ideologically opposed to Shinra, but rather a man dying from a corporate-created disease, fighting for survival by any means necessary, willing to destroy the organization that made him this way, if that is what it takes to save his own life. As Hollander's revelations hang in the air, another figure enters the confrontation, and Zack's heart breaks at the sight. Angeal has been pursuing the same leads, following his childhood friend's trail, and now stands revealed as complicit in Genesis's activities, protecting Hollander and apparently working to undermine Shinra alongside the man he grew up with. The wing extending from Angeal's shoulder is fully visible now, no longer hidden, a physical manifestation of the same genetic manipulation that created Genesis, proof that both childhood friends were products of Project G, experiments conducted before they even had voices to consent or refuse. Angel's expression carries weight of unbearable knowledge, the burden of understanding what he is and what that means for everything he believed about himself. He explains, quietly and with profound sadness, that he and Genesis are the same, products of Hollander's experiments in Benora, their mothers willing participants in Project G who agreed to genetic manipulation of their unborn children. Gillian Hewley, Angel's mother, whom Zack met in that modest house, was one of Hollander's test subjects. She allowed her son to be experimented upon before birth, and that decision shaped everything that followed, creating the enhanced warriors who would rise through soldiers' ranks and eventually discover the truth of their origins. The revelation devastates Zack on multiple levels. His mentor was created rather than born, exists as a product of scientific experimentation. His very existence a violation of natural processes and ethical boundaries. The dreams and honor that Angel preached, the philosophies that shaped Zack's understanding of what it means to be a soldier, come from someone who is himself a kind of living lie, an artificial creation masquerading as natural being. How can lessons about authenticity and integrity come from someone whose fundamental nature is manufactured? But Angel anticipates this crisis and addresses it directly, his words carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. Even if the morrow is barren of promises, nothing shall forestall my return, he says. Another quote from Lovelace, but one that carries different meaning in this context. He is acknowledging the darkness of their situation, the uncertain future that awaits those who have been created rather than born, who exist as experiments rather than people. But he is also asserting that despite all this, despite the horror of what they are and how they came to be, they still have agency, still have choice, still can decide what kind of life they will live with the time they have remaining. Angel does not make excuses for participating in Genesis's schemes or for hiding his true nature from Zack. Instead, he owns his choices while explaining the context that drove them. He's been trying to understand what he is, trying to find meaning in an existence that seems predefined and controlled by forces he never chose. The wing is not something he wanted or embraced, but a physical manifestation of his difference, an external mark of internal corruption. He carries the burden of knowing that everything distinctive about him, all his capabilities and strengths, come not from training or dedication, but from genetic manipulation he had no say in accepting. The confrontation escalates as more soldier operatives arrive, surrounding the facility, and Genesis appears to support his childhood friend against the corporation that created them both. Combat erupts between former comrades, soldier members fighting each other across the snowy landscape, the ideological and existential crisis made physical through violence. Zack fights alongside his fellow operatives, but his heart is not in it, his strikes pulling back at the last moment, unwilling to seriously harm Angel despite the tactical necessity and direct orders to eliminate all targets. In the chaos, Hollander escapes with Genesis's assistance, fleeing into the frozen wilderness and vanishing before he can be captured and interrogated further. Angel covers their retreat, using his enhanced abilities to hold off multiple soldier operatives while the scientist makes his escape, and in doing so, he cements his status as traitor and enemy of Shinra. He has made his choice, has decided that whatever Genesis is pursuing, whatever goals drive his childhood friend's desperate actions, matter more than loyalty to the corporation that made them into weapons and experiments. As the battle concludes and the immediate threat passes, Zack is left standing in the snow, watching the direction where Angel disappeared, feeling more lost than at any point since joining Soldier. His mentor has betrayed him. Or has he? Can it be called betrayal when Angel never owed loyalty to an organization that violated him at the cellular level before he could even understand what was being done? Is Zack fighting for the right side? Or has he simply been too blind to see that Shinra is the villain in this story? That everything he believed about serving the greater good was propaganda designed to make him complicit in corporate atrocity? The questions have no easy answers, and the return to Midgar provides no comfort or clarity. Soldier Headquarters feels different now. The shining symbol of heroism revealed as something darker, a factory for creating weapons out of human beings, an organization built on lies and experimentation. Zack goes through the motions of his duties, accepting new assignments, maintaining his obligations, but part of him is elsewhere, still standing in that snow, watching his mentor walk away, still trying to reconcile everything he believed with everything he has learned. He seeks refuge with Aerith, visiting the church more frequently, finding in her presence the grounding and perspective he cannot access anywhere else. She listens without judgment when he talks in vague terms about his struggles, never pressing for details he cannot share, offering comfort through simply being present and reminding him that goodness exists even when darkness seems overwhelming. The flowers continue to grow in the church, life persisting despite the metal plate blocking out the sky above, and their resilience becomes a kind of metaphor for what Zack needs to believe about himself and the world. Aerith gives him a gift during one of these visits, a pink ribbon that matches the one she wears in her own hair. It is a simple thing, fabric and sentiment, but the gesture carries weight beyond its physical form. She ties it around his arm, explaining that it will bring him luck and keep him safe, that when he looks at it, he should remember her and the flowers and the church where life grows against all odds. Zack accepts the ribbon with gratitude that goes deeper than words can express, wearing it constantly afterward, a visible reminder of the connection they share and the reasons he fights to protect people and make the world better. Time passes in a rhythm of missions and brief returns to Midgar, each assignment taking Zack further afield, as Shinra's hunt for Genesis, and Hollander continues without decisive resolution. Kisney becomes a recurring presence in his life, the young Turk often assigned to support or coordinate with soldier operations, and a friendship develops between them despite belonging to different organizations within Shinra's military structure. She is professional and dedicated, but also possesses a dry wit and perceptiveness that makes conversations with her engaging rather than merely transactional. Kisney seems to understand more than she says, her eyes suggesting awareness of complexities that her words leave unspoken. Then comes word that changes everything again. Angel has been sighted, not in some distant location, but in Midgar itself, in the slums beneath the plate. Zack mobilizes immediately, hope and dread warring in his chest at the prospect of confronting his mentor again. He finds Angel in a decrepit industrial area, standing amid rusting machinery and structural decay that mirrors the deterioration of their relationship. And for a moment, they simply look at each other across the distance. Former mentor and student separated by choices and revelations that cannot be taken back or ignored. Angel has not come for reunion or reconciliation. He has come to end this, to force a conclusion to a situation that has gone on too long and hurt too many people. The wing extending from his shoulder has grown larger, more prominent, and something in his bearing suggests resignation, a decision made and accepted despite its terrible cost. He speaks of dreams and honor one final time, but now the familiar words carry different meaning. transformed by context into something like farewell rather than instruction. What follows is not a battle but a kind of execution, though who is executing whom remains ambiguous. Angel transforms, his body shifting and expanding into something monstrous, a massive amalgamation of wings and claws and raw power that has left humanity behind. This is Angel Penance, the final evolution of Project G's modifications. What happens when the cellular degradation progresses beyond certain thresholds and control is lost? The creature retains some element of Angel's consciousness, enough to direct its actions, but not enough to be fully human anymore, existing in the terrible space between person and monster. Zack fights because he must, because the creature threatens everyone nearby, because Angel himself wants this confrontation, needs it to end this way. The battle is brutal and heartbreaking, Zack's sword cutting into flesh that used to belong to his mentor, his attacks aimed at weak points in a body that has become almost unrecognizable. Through the entire fight, he is crying, tears streaming down his face, each strike accompanied by anguish at what this situation has become, at what has been lost that can never be recovered. When Angel Penance falls, the monstrous form dissolves, leaving behind Angel in his human shape, mortal wounds bleeding his life away onto the industrial floor. Zack drops to his knees beside his dying mentor, hands hovering uselessly, wanting to help, but knowing there is nothing he can do, that this ending was always inevitable once Angel chose his path. The older man smiles despite the pain, expression peaceful in a way his face has not been since before Benora's destruction, and he reaches for the Buster Sword that has remained on his back throughout everything, the weapon he preserved so carefully and rarely used. With failing strength, Angel offers the sword to Zack, pressing the familiar hilt into his student's hands. "Take this," he says, voice weakening but still carrying conviction. "You'll be my living legacy." The Buster Sword represents everything Angel believed in, the dreams and honor he preached even when his own nature seemed to contradict those ideals. By giving it to Zack, he is transferring responsibility and philosophy, asking his student to carry forward the values he himself could not fully embody, to be the hero he wanted to be, but circumstances and genetics conspired to prevent. Angel speaks his final words, an answer to a question that has haunted him since discovering the truth of his creation. "What do angels dream of?" he asks rhetorically, then provides the answer with his last breath. Angels dream of becoming human. His entire struggle has been about wanting to be simply a person rather than an experiment, to possess identity that comes from choices rather than genetic manipulation, to transcend the circumstances of his creation through force of will and moral character. In the end, he failed at that transcendence, but succeeded in passing something worthwhile to someone who can carry it forward more successfully. Then he dies, his body going still, and Zack is left holding the Buster Sword and screaming his grief into uncaring metal and concrete. The weight of the weapon is nothing compared to the weight of what it represents, the legacy he has inherited, and the responsibility that comes with it. Angel wanted Zack to be his living legacy, to embody the dreams and honor that he himself could not sustain. That means living according to those principles, fighting for what is right rather than what is convenient, protecting those who need protection, even when it conflicts with orders or threatens personal safety. It means being the hero Angel believed Zack could become, the person who would justify his mentor's faith and validate the lessons that shaped him. The loss transforms Zack fundamentally. Where before he maintained some measure of puppyish enthusiasm despite the darkness he encountered, now there is hardness in him, a core of steel forged through grief and responsibility. He keeps the Buster Sword, strapping it to his back where Angel carried it, and the weapon becomes as much part of his identity as his own name. It is too large and heavy for practical use in many situations, requiring enhanced strength to wield effectively, but Zack refuses to abandon it or replace it with something more convenient. The sword is Angel's legacy, and he will carry it until his own strength fails or his own life ends, whichever comes first. Missions continue, the war between Shinra and its enemies grinding forward regardless of personal tragedy. Zack throws himself into his duties with renewed intensity, partly to honor Angel's memory and partly to avoid sitting still long enough for grief to completely overwhelm him. He hunts Genesis with single-minded focus, determined to end the threat his mentor died trying to understand and mitigate. Each mission brings him closer to confronting the red-clad warrior, following trails across continents, gathering intelligence about Project G and the degradation process, slowly piecing together the full scope of what Hollander's experiments created. In quieter moments between operations, Zack visits Aerith, and she becomes the anchor that keeps him grounded when darkness threatens to consume him. She does not know the details of what happened with Angel. Zack cannot share classified information, even with someone he trusts, but she understands loss and grief in her own way, having lost her birth mother to circumstances she barely remembers. Aerith offers comfort not through empty platitudes, but through presence and acceptance, creating space where Zack can be vulnerable without fear of judgment or exploitation. Their relationship deepens from friendship into something more complicated and precious, feelings developing that neither one articulates explicitly, but both recognize implicitly. Aerith looks forward to Zack's visits with anticipation that goes beyond mere friendliness, and Zack finds himself thinking of her at odd moments during missions, wondering what she is doing, hoping she is safe, imagining the life they might build together if circumstances were different and he was not a soldier bound to Shinra's service. They go on what might charitably be called dates, walking through the sectors of Midgar's slums, visiting the market where Aerith sells flowers, sharing simple meals and simple conversation that feels more valuable than any luxury wealth could provide. But their time together exists under shadow of inevitability. Zack knows that Shinra's interest in Aerith is not casual surveillance but something more sinister, that eventually the corporation will move to secure her permanently, adding her to whatever collection of experimental subjects and genetic resources they maintain for their research programs. He tries to protect her through his presence and position, hoping that being known as someone close to a first-class soldier will make Shinra hesitate before taking action against her. But he also knows this protection is temporary and incomplete, that his rank and reputation provide only limited shield against an organization that views people as resources to be exploited when useful and discarded when convenient. The investigation into Genesis's activities leads to discovery of more Project G test subjects, people who are experimented upon or who are degrading copies created through Genesis's abilities. Many of these individuals are suffering, their bodies breaking down at cellular level, experiencing pain that has no cure or treatment that Shinra is willing to provide. Zack encounters them during missions, sometimes fighting them when they attack mindlessly, sometimes simply witnessing their suffering when they are too far gone to be threats. Each encounter reinforces the horror of what Project G represents, what happens when scientific curiosity and corporate ambition are allowed to operate without ethical constraints or concern for human cost. The trail eventually leads back to a location that carries dark significance. Nibelheim, a small village in the mountains near Midgar, requires investigation. Professor Hojo has been conducting research there, and intelligence suggests Genesis may be targeting the facility for reasons related to finding a cure for his degradation. The mission is assigned to multiple soldier operatives, including Zack and Sephiroth, with Cloud Strife, an infantry soldier from Nibelheim itself, assigned as support. Cloud is unremarkable in most ways, another face in the sea of rank and file troops that make up Shinra's military, distinguished mainly by his earnest desire to prove himself and advance through the ranks to potentially join soldier one day. The journey to Nibelheim is Zack's first extended time working directly with Sephiroth, and observing the legendary warrior up close provides insight into why his reputation extends so far. Sephiroth's combat prowess is genuinely superhuman. His speed and precision making even Zack look clumsy by comparison. His tactical awareness and decision-making demonstrating why he holds the position of greatest living soldier. But there is also something distant about him, a quality of being present physically while mentally existing somewhere else, as though his thoughts occupy spaces ordinary people cannot access or understand. They are met in Nibelheim by a young woman named Tifa Lockhart, daughter of the village elder, who volunteers to serve as their guide through the mountain paths leading to the reactor they are meant to inspect. She is striking and athletic, her martial arts training evident in how she moves, and there is warmth in her personality that reminds Zack of Aerith, a similar quality of genuine kindness existing without artifice or agenda. Tifa seems particularly interested in the mission's infantry support, asking questions about Cloud and seeming disappointed when he avoids her attention, though the reasons for her interest remain unclear to outside observers. The reactor inspection begins as routine operation, checking equipment and ensuring proper functionality, standard maintenance that requires soldier presence mainly as precaution against potential threats. But inside the facility, in chambers not meant for regular access, they discover containment units housing creatures that violate natural law and ethical boundaries in equal measure. These are failed experiments from Project S, Hojo's rival, to Hollander's Project G, attempts to create enhanced warriors through Genova cell injection that resulted in monsters and madness rather than stable super soldiers. The creatures are kept in Mako-filled tanks, suspended in energy that sustains them while preventing escape, living testaments to what happens when experimentation goes wrong and the results are too valuable to terminate despite being too dangerous to release. Sephiroth's reaction to these discoveries is initially subtle, a slight stiffening in his posture, a moment's hesitation before moving deeper into the facility. But something is triggering in him, connections forming between what he is seeing and information he possesses about his own origins. In the deepest chambers of the reactor, they find documentation of Professor Gast's research, notes about the Genova project and its goals, references to creating a warrior infused with the cells of an ancient, someone who could access the planet's knowledge and power in ways ordinary humans could not. The documentation does not explicitly state that Sephiroth is the product of this research, but the implications are clear enough for someone looking for answers about their own nature. Sephiroth has always known he was different, that his abilities exceeded even other first-class operatives, but he believed his power came through superior genetics and training rather than experimentation. The possibility that he might be another manufactured warrior, another test subject created through Genova cell injection, plants seeds of doubt and horror that begin growing in soil already disturbed by years of feeling separate from ordinary humanity. Genesis chooses this moment to appear, materializing in the reactor with his characteristic theatrical flair, quoting Loveless and speaking in riddles about monsters and creation, about the price of power and the truth of origins. He addresses Sephiroth directly, calling him brother, suggesting they share more than merely rank and organization, that their fundamental natures are more similar than Sephiroth wants to acknowledge. Genesis speaks of Genova as their mother, of being created rather than born, of existing as experiments in corporate lab rather than children raised by loving families. The confrontation is brief and inconclusive, Genesis departing before serious combat can develop, but he has accomplished his objective. He has planted poison in Sephiroth's mind, questions that will fester and grow, driving the legendary warrior towards seeking answers that will ultimately destroy him. Sephiroth becomes withdrawn and distant, his already remote personality retreating further into internal spaces, his thoughts clearly occupied by the implications of what Genesis suggested and what he himself discovered in the reactor's depths. The mission concludes, the reactor deemed functional despite concerning discoveries about Hojo's experiments, and the team returns to Nibelheim to rest before journeying back to Midgar. But Sephiroth does not rest. He spends days locked in the basement of Shinra Manor, a structure on the outskirts of town that serves as research facility and archive for classified projects. In that basement library, surrounded by documents and reports that should never be accessible to unauthorized personnel, Sephiroth reads everything Gast and Hojo documented about Project S, about Genova, about the circumstances of his own creation. What he learns breaks something fundamental in his psyche. Sephiroth discovers that he was created as an experiment, that his mother, Lucretia, was a scientist, who agreed to have her unborn child injected with Genova cells, that Professor Hojo is his biological father, and conducted these experiments on his own offspring. Everything Sephiroth believed about his origins was lie or misdirection. He is not naturally gifted or blessed with superior genetics, but rather an artificial creation, a weapon built by corporate scientists, his very existence owing more to laboratory procedures than to love or choice. The knowledge of Genova's true nature makes everything worse. The documentation incorrectly identifies Genova as a Cetra, one of the ancients who lived in harmony with the planet before humanity rose to dominance. Sephiroth reads that Genova was excavated from geological strata 2,000 years old, that this entity possessed connection to the planet that modern humans have lost, that his cells came from something ancient and powerful that existed long before Shinra or even contemporary civilization. In his deteriorating mental state, Sephiroth misinterprets this information, believing himself to be descendant of the ancients, someone with rightful claim to the planet that humans have corrupted and despoiled. In reality, Genova is not a Cetra, but rather the entity that nearly destroyed them, a calamity from the skies that crashed into the planet millennia ago and infected the ancient race with its cells, nearly driving them to extinction before being sealed away. But Sephiroth does not have access to this correct information, and in his crisis, he constructs a narrative that transforms his horror at being created into rage at humanity for what they have done to the planet and to him. If he is descendant of ancients, then the current civilization is enemy, invaders who stole a world that rightfully belongs to him and his kind. The breakdown accelerates over several days. Sephiroth emerging from the mansion library fundamentally changed. His sanity fractured beyond repair. his previous dedication to duty and honor replaced by conviction that he must reclaim the planet for the ancients and punish humanity for their crimes. He speaks to no one, responds to no attempts at communication, exists in a state of detachment that is terrifying to witness. Zack tries to reach him, to offer support, or at least understand what is happening, but Sephiroth looks through him, rather than at him, seeing something else entirely, lost in visions and conclusions that make sense only to his fractured mind. Then Nibelheim burns. Sephiroth sets fire to the village systematically, moving from structure to structure with Masamune blade in hand, killing anyone who attempts to flee or resist, determined to eliminate every trace of the place where his truth was revealed. The massacre is methodical and complete. Residents murdered in their homes, families destroyed, the entire village consumed by flames that reflect the inferno inside Sephiroth's mind. He speaks of humanity as a plague, of their corruption of the planet being intolerable, of his duty to cleanse the world and restore it to the ancients, who understood how to live in harmony with its energies. Zack responds immediately when the fires begin, racing through burning streets in desperate attempt to save whoever he can, fighting through smoke and flames to reach trapped residents. But there are too many fires and too few rescuers, and Sephiroth moves with terrifying efficiency, his enhanced speed allowing him to cover the entire village faster than Zack can keep up. Most residents die in the initial assault, and those who survive the first minutes are mostly doomed by the flames that spread unchecked through wooden structures never designed to withstand this kind of destruction. Tifa discovers her father murdered in their home, killed by Sephiroth's blade for no reason beyond being human and present. Grief and rage drive her up the mountain toward the reactor, following the silver-haired warrior who destroyed her life, determined to exact vengeance even though she has no realistic chance of succeeding. Cloud follows her, the infantry soldier abandoning his post in desperate attempt to protect the girl he secretly loves, though he knows he is nowhere near skilled or strong enough to face a first-class soldier who has gone mad. At the reactor, Sephiroth enters the chamber where Jenova's remains are stored, speaking to the entity as though it can hear and respond, addressing it as Mother, claiming that he finally understands his purpose and place in the world. He plans to take Jenova from this place, to reunite with the source of his power, to use that connection to accomplish his vision of planetary cleansing and ancient restoration. His delusions have fully consumed him, transforming a warrior who was once Shinra's greatest asset into a threat that could potentially destroy civilization if not stopped. Zack arrives at the reactor in time to confront Sephiroth before he can depart with Jenova. The battle that follows is the most difficult fight of Zack's life, testing every skill and technique he has developed, pushing him beyond his limits against an opponent who is simply superior in every measurable category. Sephiroth's combat ability, already legendary, seems enhanced by his madness, his attacks flowing with deadly grace, his defense perfect, his counter-strikes landing with devastating precision. Zack fights with everything he has, the Buster Sword that represents Angel's legacy gripped in hands that refuse to yield despite the overwhelming disadvantage. The battle is brutal and prolonged, both warriors drawing on enhanced stamina and regenerative capabilities that allow them to sustain combat far longer than ordinary humans could manage. But ultimately, Sephiroth's superior skill tells, and Zack finds himself overwhelmed, wounded and disarmed, his body failing despite his determination. Sephiroth prepares to deliver the killing blow. Masamune raised for a strike that will end Zack's interference permanently, and there is no apparent salvation, no way for this confrontation to end in anything other than the first-class operative's death. Then Tifa appears, having made her way into the reactor through sheer determination, and she attacks Sephiroth from behind with her father's sword, driven by grief and rage that lend her strength beyond her normal capabilities. But she is not enhanced, not trained to soldier standards, and Sephiroth defeats her almost casually, his blade opening a terrible wound across her torso before discarding her aside, leaving her to bleed out on the reactor floor while he returns his attention to Zack and the task of securing Jenova's remains. Cloud arrives last, the infantry soldier finding the reactor chamber painted with blood and his childhood friend apparently dying. Sephiroth, standing amid the carnage, preparing to claim victory. Something breaks in Cloud at the sight, desperation and rage combining with the minor Mako enhancement all infantry soldiers receive, and he attacks with suicidal determination, catching Sephiroth off guard through sheer improbability of an ordinary soldier posing any threat. Cloud's attack is wild and desperate, lacking technique but carrying absolute commitment, and impossibly, his sword finds its mark, piercing through Sephiroth's abdomen, wounding the legendary warrior. Sephiroth looks down at the blade protruding from his body with expression of surprise and disdain, shocked that someone as insignificant as an infantry soldier could land a blow on him. But the wound is real and serious, blood flowing from the injury, and for a moment, Sephiroth's confidence falters. He retreats into the chamber where Jenova is stored, Cloud following with his sword still embedded in the silver-haired warrior's body, the two of them disappearing into the depths of the reactor in a final confrontation that Zack cannot witness due to his own injuries. What happens in that final moment between Cloud and Sephiroth becomes unclear, the details lost to trauma and later manipulation of memories. Cloud will claim that he defeated Sephiroth, that he pulled his sword free and struck again, that he sent the legendary warrior tumbling into the reactor's core to be consumed by raw Mako energy. Whether this is accurate recollection or wishful reconstruction is impossible to determine in the aftermath, when everyone involved is unconscious or dying, and the only witnesses are flames and machines that keep no testimony. Zack regains consciousness to find the reactor in ruins, fires burning through systems, alarms blaring warnings about catastrophic failures and imminent meltdown. He drags himself to where Tifa lies bleeding, her injuries severe enough that she will die without immediate medical attention. Cloud is nearby, unconscious but alive, his body bearing wounds that suggest he participated in combat far beyond what an infantry soldier should survive. Sephiroth is nowhere to be seen, apparently fallen into the reactor core as Cloud will later claim, though his body is never recovered, and the circumstances surrounding his defeat remain frustratingly unclear. Zack carries both injured Nibelheim residents down from the mountain, his enhanced strength sufficient to bear their weight despite his own injuries, racing against time and deteriorating conditions as the reactor begins to fail catastrophically behind them. He delivers Tifa to her neighbors who survived the massacre, ordinary people whose medical knowledge is limited, but who promise to do everything possible to save the girl. Cloud he keeps with him, the infantry soldier still unconscious and requiring more specialized treatment than the village survivors can provide. Professor Hojo arrives with Shinra reinforcements, supposedly to investigate the incident and contain any damage to corporate assets. But Hojo's interest lies not in humanitarian concerns, or even in understanding what drove Sephiroth to his rampage. The professor sees opportunity in the chaos, test subjects delivered conveniently to his doorstep, participants in an incident involving Jenova, who can be studied to advance his research. Before Zack fully comprehends what is happening, before he can resist or refuse, Shinra soldiers under Hojo's command subdue him, injecting sedatives that override even his enhanced physiology, rendering him helpless. When Zack wakes, he is no longer in Nibelheim. He is confined to a containment tube in Hojo's laboratory in Shinra Manor's basement, suspended in Mako energy that keeps him alive while preventing any possibility of escape. Cloud occupies an adjacent tube, still catatonic, his mind retreated to some interior space where reality cannot reach him. Around them, laboratory equipment hums and monitors display readings, documenting every aspect of their physiology as Hojo conducts his experiments with the detachment of someone studying insects rather than human beings. The experimentation is brutal and invasive. Hojo injects them with Genova cells harvested from the entity's remains, attempting to replicate the process that created Sephiroth, trying to produce new super soldiers who can match or exceed his lost masterwork. The injections are accompanied by continuous Mako exposure. Massive doses of planetary energy that would kill ordinary humans, but which enhance physiology, can theoretically withstand. The process is agonizing, cellular-level pain that has no respite, consciousness floating in haze of suffering punctuated by brief moments of clarity when the sedatives wear thin before new doses plunge him back under. Time loses meaning in the tubes. Days blur into weeks, weeks into months, the progression of seasons invisible in the sealed laboratory, where artificial light provides the only illumination. Zack maintains awareness through sheer force of will, his mind clinging to memories of Aerith and Angel, of the promises he made and the legacy he carries, using these anchors to maintain identity when everything else suggests dissolution into the Mako that surrounds him. But even his determination has limits, and there are periods where consciousness slips away entirely, where he exists in fever dreams and hallucinations that blend memory with fantasy until distinguishing truth from imagination becomes impossible. Cloud fares worse, his weaker physiology and untrained mind unable to maintain coherent identity under the assault of Genova cells and Mako exposure. The infantry soldier retreats completely into catatonia, his eyes open but unseeing, his body alive but mind apparently absent, existing in some liminal state between consciousness and death. Hojo notes this deterioration with clinical interest, adjusting dosages and procedures, treating Cloud's breakdown as simply one more data point in his research, rather than human tragedy unfolding in real time. The professor's goal becomes clear through fragments of overheard conversation and documented procedures. He is creating Sephiroth clones, attempting to produce copies of his greatest creation, warriors who possess Genova cells and Mako enhancement, similar to what made Sephiroth into a legend. The fact that Sephiroth himself apparently died in Nibelheim only increases Hojo's determination to replicate his success, to prove that the process can be repeated and refined, that the legendary warrior was not an unrepeatable accident, but rather the first success of a methodology that can be systematically applied. But the experimentation fails in crucial ways. Zack's body accepts the Genova cells and withstands the Mako exposure, his existing soldier enhancement apparently providing foundation that allows him to survive procedures that kill other test subjects. But he does not transform into a Sephiroth copy, does not develop the abilities or characteristics that Hojo seeks. His physiology changes, his capabilities increase marginally, but the fundamental breakthrough that would make him into new Sephiroth eludes the professor's attempts to replicate it. Hojo labels him a failure, though one too interesting to simply terminate, continuing the experimentation in hopes that extended exposure might eventually produce desired results. Cloud is similarly classified as a failed experiment, his catatonic state rendering him useless for any practical military application. But Hojo keeps him alive as well, using him as control subject, comparing his deterioration with Zack's relative stability, documenting differences in how their physiology responds to identical procedures. The infantry soldier exists in his tube, alive but absent, a body sustained by machinery, while the person who inhabited it has apparently fled to unreachable interior spaces. 4 years pass in the laboratory, 4 years of imprisonment and experimentation, 4 years of pain and degradation. The outside world continues without them, unaware of their suffering or even their location. Shinra's official story declares both Zack and Cloud killed in action during the Nibelheim incident, casualties of Sephiroth's rampage, their deaths regrettable but ultimately inconsequential to ongoing corporate operations. No search is mounted, no rescue attempted, because as far as anyone outside Hojo's research circle knows, there is no one to rescue, just bodies already buried and mourned. Aerith waits in Midgar, watching for Zack's return, wondering why he stopped visiting the church, why the letters and calls ceased without explanation. She refuses to believe he simply abandoned her, that what they shared meant so little he could walk away without even a goodbye. Something has happened, something terrible, but she lacks information or resources to investigate, and her inquiries to Shinra about Zack's status are met with condolences for her loss and assurances that he died heroically in the line of duty. She does not believe these lies, cannot accept them, but neither can she do anything to expose them or discover the truth they conceal. In the laboratory, Zack endures and plans. He observes patterns in security rotations, notes when guards are least attentive, memorizes the layout visible from his containment tube. The Genova cells in his system grant him capabilities beyond what standard soldier enhancement provided, increased strength and healing that Hojo's instruments document, but whose full extent the professor does not completely understand. Zack allows Hojo to believe the experimentation produced only marginal results, hiding his true capabilities, waiting for opportunity to present itself. That opportunity finally arrives when maintenance procedures require his temporary removal from the containment tube. Guards extract him, expecting a weakened prisoner whose years in suspension have left him barely able to stand, and their lack of preparation proves fatal. Zack moves with speed and precision that shock his captors, his enhanced physiology allowing him to overcome multiple armed guards before they can effectively respond. He kills not from malice but from necessity, understanding that hesitation or mercy will result in recapture and a return to the tubes, to endless continuation of suffering that has already consumed 4 years of his life. He retrieves the Buster Sword from storage, where Hojo kept it as curiosity, the massive blade feeling, perfectly balanced in hands that have not held it in years, but whose muscle memory remains intact. Then he returns to the laboratory, fighting through reinforcements, attempting to stop his escape, and he destroys his containment tube, along with every other piece of equipment involved in Hojo's experiments. The laboratory burns, research destroyed, years of work reduced to ashes and slag, and Zack feels no remorse at the destruction, only grim satisfaction that these instruments of torture will never be used on anyone else. He carries Cloud from the ruins, the infantry soldier's body frighteningly light after years in the tube, his catatonic state unchanged by the escape. Zack cannot leave him behind, will not abandon someone who stood beside him in Nibelheim, even if Cloud no longer recognizes him or anyone else. They will escape together, or they will die together, but Zack refuses to buy his freedom with someone else's continued suffering. The Buster Sword represents Angel's legacy, the idea that honor matters even when inconvenient, and carrying Cloud is simply living according to that philosophy, regardless of how it complicates escape. Fleeing Nibelheim proves easier than anticipated. The village was never rebuilt after Sephiroth's massacre, left as monument to corporate secrets that need concealing, and the few Shinra personnel stationed there focus their attention on the burning laboratory rather than pursuing escapees into the surrounding wilderness. Zack carries Cloud into the mountains, following paths that will keep them away from roads and settlements where Shinra might have presence, moving through terrain that is harsh but navigable for someone with enhanced endurance and determination. The journey across the world toward Midgar becomes an odyssey of survival and evasion. Zack must find food and shelter, while carrying a companion who cannot contribute to their survival, must avoid Shinra patrols that are certainly searching for them, must navigate through territories where his distinctive appearance and massive sword make remaining inconspicuous nearly impossible. He talks to Cloud constantly during their travels, maintaining one-sided conversations in hopes that somewhere beneath the catatonia, his friend can hear and is comforted by the sound of another voice in the darkness. He speaks of his plans for when they reach Midgar, of how he will become a mercenary now that soldier is no longer an option, of how Cloud can join him once his mind heals, of adventures they will have and people they will help. He talks about Aerith, describing her with warmth that makes clear the depth of his feelings, promising to introduce Cloud to her once they are safe, once the immediate crisis has passed and they can pretend at having normal lives. The talking helps Zack as much as it might help Cloud, providing distraction from the grinding difficulty of their journey and maintaining hope that future exists beyond mere survival. They survive through combination of Zack's skills and fortunate encounters. Cisne appears at crucial moments, the Turk agent apparently tracking them, but offering help rather than attempting capture, providing supplies and information about Shinra movements that allow them to avoid patrols. She never explains her actions, never acknowledges that she is committing treason by assisting them, simply appearing when most needed and vanishing before Zack can properly thank her or question her motivations. Her assistance suggests that not everyone in Shinra supports what Hojo did, that some corporate operatives maintain enough humanity to see injustice and choose to oppose it despite personal risk. Lazard also appears, but transformed in ways that mirror Angel's final state. The former director of Soldier has become an Angel copy, degrading and dying, his body breaking down from cellular instability, while his mind remains intact enough to communicate and offer assistance. He explains that he abandoned his position at Shinra, that he has been working against the corporation from within for longer than Zack realized, that his apparent loyalty was always facade concealing deeper opposition to corporate practices he found unconscionable. Lazard provides intelligence about Genesis's location and current activities, information that will become relevant when immediate concerns about survival yield to larger questions about unfinished business and threats that remain unresolved. The trail leads eventually to Banora Underground, the massive cavern system beneath the village that Shinra destroyed years ago. Here, Genesis has established his final refuge, surrounded by degrading copies and pursuing his desperate search for a cure with time running out. The confrontation between Zack and Genesis has been building since the beginning. These two warriors whose paths have intersected repeatedly without decisive resolution And now they finally meet for what will be their last battle. Genesis is visibly deteriorating, his body showing signs of advanced degradation, his movements less fluid than they once were, his power diminished but still formidable. He speaks of finding cure in the life stream itself, of accessing something called the gift of the goddess that Lovelace references, of transcending the limitations of his flawed creation through force of will and desperate measures. His degradation has progressed to the point where standard solutions are no longer viable, where only extraordinary interventions might save him, and he has pursued every possibility no matter how unlikely or dangerous. Deep in the underground caverns, Zack encounters something that defies explanation through conventional understanding. A presence manifests, something that might be the planet's consciousness, or might be collective memory of all life that has returned to the life stream, appearing in form that witnesses perceive differently based on their own context and expectations. This is a Minerva, the goddess referenced in Lovelace, though whether she is literal deity or simply anthropomorphized planetary awareness remains unclear. She offers Genesis what he seeks, the cure for his degradation, but demands that he prove himself worthy through combat, through demonstrating qualities that justify intervention on his behalf. The battle between Zack and Genesis' avatar, the Red Warrior enhanced by Minerva's power, pushes both fighters to their absolute limits. Genesis wields abilities that should not be possible, attacks that warp reality and assault on multiple levels simultaneously, his desperation lending him strength that his degrading body should no longer possess. But Zack has grown through his journey, has been forged by suffering and loss into something harder and more capable than the puppyish second class who began this story, and he meets Genesis's assault with skill and determination that honor Angel's legacy. When Genesis finally falls, defeated but alive, something changes in him. The cure takes hold, stabilizing his cells and arresting the degradation that was killing him. But more than physical healing occurs. Genesis seems to achieve some measure of peace or understanding, his quest concluded even if not in the manner he originally envisioned. He speaks a final time of Lovelace, but now the epic poem's verses carry different meaning, transformation rather than tragedy, the possibility of redemption even for those who have committed terrible acts in desperate circumstances. Genesis departs, his fate left ambiguous, perhaps to sleep until the planet needs him, or perhaps simply to disappear from the stage where he played such a destructive role. His story ends not with death, but with withdrawal, transformation from antagonist into something else, someone who might eventually contribute positively if given time and opportunity to grow beyond the bitterness and desperation that drove his actions. Zack allows him to leave, understanding that further combat serves no purpose, that Genesis no longer poses threat to anyone now that his degradation is cured and his immediate desperation relieved. Lazar dies during the confrontation, his copy body finally succumbing to the instability that doomed all Angeal copies. His final words express satisfaction at having done something meaningful to oppose Shinra, at having used his position to make some difference, even if that difference ultimately proved insufficient to prevent all the suffering and injustice he witnessed. He asks Zack to continue the fight, to keep working toward a better world where corporations like Shinra cannot operate with impunity, where people are treated as people rather than resources or experiments. Then he dies, and Zack is left with yet another legacy to carry, another person whose hopes and dreams he must try to honor through his own actions. Emerging from the Benora underground, Zack resumes his journey toward Midgar with Cloud still catatonic and carried on his back. The road ahead is long, but the destination is finally visible, the city rising on the horizon, representing safety and reunion with Aerith, and the possibility of building life beyond constant flight and combat. Zack allows himself to hope, to imagine the future that awaits once they reach the city, once he can deliver Cloud to medical professionals who might help him recover, once he can see Aerith again and explain where he has been and why he disappeared without word. He talks to Cloud about these plans, describing the life they will build, the mercenary company they will form together. Zack has dreams for after the crisis, aspirations that seem modest compared to his youthful ambitions of becoming a hero, but which feel more valuable for their attainability. He wants to help people without being beholden to Shinra, to use his skills for causes he actually believes in, rather than corporate objectives he cannot fully endorse. He wants to be with Aerith, to explore whatever it is they have together, to see if the connection they forged in stolen moments can become foundation for something lasting. Cloud stirs for the first time in years, his eyes focusing briefly, his mouth forming words that come out slurred and confused, but which suggest some ember of consciousness still burns beneath the catatonia. He cannot sustain awareness, slipping back into his unresponsive state within moments, but the brief emergence gives Zack hope that his friend might eventually recover, that the damage from Hojo's experiments is not permanent, that patience and proper care might restore what was taken. They are so close to Midgar, mere miles from safety, when Shinra's final response arrives. The corporation has been tracking them, has known their location and trajectory, and has decided that allowing Zack to reach the city with whatever knowledge he possesses about Hojo's experiments is unacceptable risk. The orders come from the highest levels. Eliminate the targets, leave no witnesses, ensure that whatever secrets they carry die with them in the wasteland outside Midgar, where their bodies will never be found. The army that appears numbers in the hundreds, infantry soldiers and specialized units deployed with single objective of killing 2 men, who pose threat to corporate security. This is not the surgical precision of the Turks or the elite capability of soldier, but rather overwhelming force applied without subtlety or mercy, the certainty that sufficient numbers will eventually prevail, regardless of how skilled or enhanced the targets might be. Helicopters and armored vehicles support the ground forces, creating killing field that offers no avenue of escape, no possibility of breaking through to safety beyond. Zack sees them coming and knows immediately what this means. He cannot outrun them while carrying Cloud, cannot fight through them without being overwhelmed by sheer numbers, cannot talk or negotiate his way out of situation where his death has been determined by people who will never hear his voice or consider his perspective. The ending that has been approaching since the moment he fell into Hojo's hands has finally arrived, and there is no escape, no miracle that will save him, no unexpected intervention that will shift circumstances in his favor. He sets Cloud down behind cover, propping him against rocks, where he will have some protection from the crossfire. Then Zack turns to face the approaching army, the Buster Sword gripped in hands that do not shake despite understanding what comes next. He will make his stand here, will fight with everything he has, will give Cloud every possible second to potentially escape or be rescued by some unforeseen chance. This is what honor demands, what Angel's legacy requires, the final expression of dreams that have shaped his journey from beginning to this inevitable conclusion. The battle that follows is glorious and futile. One enhanced warrior against an army, skill and determination pitted against overwhelming numerical advantage. Zack fights like the hero he always wanted to become, his blade cutting through enemies with devastating efficiency, his enhanced abilities allowing him to move faster than ordinary soldiers can track. He dances through bullets and explosions, his combat instincts honed by years of experience, allowing him to react to threats before they fully materialize. And for a time, it seems almost possible that he might prevail, that individual excellence might triumph over mere quantity. But there are too many of them, and even enhanced healing has limits when damage accumulates faster than regeneration can address it. Bullets find their marks despite his speed. Explosions throw him back despite his strength, and slowly, inexorably, his body begins to fail. The digital mind wave, the system that has visualized his memories and relationships throughout his journey, begins to malfunction. Images of people he knew flickering and failing, representations of bonds that sustained him breaking down as his consciousness begins to fragment. Images of Angel appear, the mentor who shaped him and whose legacy he has carried. Images of Aerith, the woman he loves and will never see again, whose face he holds in his mind as reminder of why he fights and what is worth protecting. Images of Cisne and other friends made along the way. People who believed in him and who he hopes will remember him after he is gone. One by one, the images fail, the connections severed not by loss of feeling, but by the simple physical reality that his brain is shutting down, that death is approaching and cannot be denied or delayed. The final image that appears before the system fails completely is of Cloud, and the words that accompany it carry weight of prophecy and hope. You will be my living legacy, Zack thinks, or perhaps says aloud, echoing Angel's final words to him, passing forward the burden and honor of carrying dreams and principles into a future he will not see. Cloud must survive, must recover, must become the person who validates everything Zack believed in and fought for, must be the proof that suffering and sacrifice and struggle were not meaningless. Then the digital mind wave fails entirely, and Zack is alone with his dying body and the army that will not stop shooting until he is certainly dead. He falls to his knees, the Buster sword slipping from hands that no longer have strength to grip it properly, his body perforated by wounds that are individually survivable but collectively fatal. Blood pools beneath him, staining the wasteland soil, his enhanced healing finally overwhelmed by damage that exceeds all capacity to repair. The shooting stops. The army withdraws, satisfied that their target is neutralized, that whatever threat he represented has been eliminated. They do not confirm the kill up close, do not collect the body or verify complete cessation of vital signs, simply assuming that the amount of damage inflicted must have been sufficient. They leave him bleeding in the dirt, alone except for Cloud still propped against rocks nearby. Two bodies abandoned in the wasteland, where scavengers and weather will erase all evidence of their existence. But Zack is not quite dead yet. He clings to consciousness through sheer determination, pulling himself across the ground toward where Cloud rests. Every movement agony, every breath a struggle, but refusing to simply lie down and accept death before saying what needs to be said. He reaches Cloud, his bloody hand grasping the infantry soldier's jacket, and miraculously, Cloud's eyes focus, consciousness returning at this final moment to witness what comes next. Zack speaks with voice that is barely a whisper, his words slurred and interrupted by coughing, but he forces them out because this cannot be left unsaid. He tells Cloud that he is proud of him, that he was amazing in the reactor, that he saved everyone when it mattered most. The words are gift, affirmation given to someone who will carry guilt and questions about that day for years to come. Evidence that he was brave and capable, even if his memory of events will eventually become confused and compromised. Then Zack reaches for the Buster Sword, the massive blade that has been his constant companion, the physical embodiment of Angel's legacy and everything he believed about dreams and honor. With the last of his strength, he pushes the sword toward Cloud, pressing the hilt into hands that automatically grip it. "Take this," he says, echoing Angel's final words, passing forward the legacy one last time. "You'll be my living legacy. My honor, my dreams, they're yours now." He tries to say more, to provide advice or wisdom or simply goodbye, but the words will not come. His body has reached its limits. His injuries too severe to sustain life any longer, and death arrives with almost gentle finality. Zack Fair dies in the wasteland outside, Midgar, 3 weeks before his 24th birthday. His dreams unfulfilled, and his promises unkept. Another casualty of Shinra's machinations and the world's cruelty. The puppy who wanted to be a hero dies believing he failed, not understanding that everything he did mattered more than he could possibly know, that the legacy he passes forward will eventually help save the entire world. Cloud kneels beside the body of his friend, his mind slowly processing what has happened, consciousness returning in fragments that do not yet form coherent whole. He looks at Zack's face, peaceful in death despite the violence that brought him to this point, and something breaks inside him. The trauma of Hojo's experiments, the guilt over Nibelheim, and his inability to save anyone, the grief of watching someone who protected him die alone in the dirt. All of this becomes too much for his psyche to withstand. His mind fractures, shattering under the accumulated weight of horrors no person should have to endure. In that moment of complete psychological collapse, Cloud's consciousness does what human minds sometimes do when reality becomes unbearable. It constructs a shield, a protective fiction that allows him to continue functioning when his true self cannot bear to remain present. His mind reaches for materials available in his shattered memories, the childhood dreams of becoming a soldier hero, the stories Zack told during their year-long escape about his own experiences and adventures, the confidence and capability Cloud always wished he possessed. From these fragments, his psyche builds a new identity, a version of himself that never failed, that achieved everything he set out to accomplish, that possesses the strength and skill to stand against any threat. The Genova cells in his system, dormant product of Hojo's experiments, do not create this false identity. They do something perhaps more insidious. They make it feel real. The cellular corruption acts as glue for shattered memories, lending false coherence to a constructed narrative that should collapse under examination. What should be an obvious delusion becomes, to Cloud's damaged mind, indistinguishable from genuine memory. He believes himself to be a first-class soldier because his broken psyche needs to believe it, and Genova's influence makes that belief sustainable where it otherwise would crumble. Cloud stands, lifting the Buster Sword that is too large for him and which he should not be able to wield effectively, and he walks away from Zack's body without looking back. He walks toward Midgar with purpose that comes from his fractured mind's desperate reconstruction, his false memories providing direction when his actual past offers only trauma and confusion. He is going to become a mercenary, he tells himself, using skills he genuinely possesses but attributes to training he never received. The person walking toward Midgar is not Cloud Strife, the infantry soldier who failed to protect anyone, but rather someone his broken psyche has constructed from desperation and childhood dreams, someone who can function when the truth would leave him catatonic in the wasteland beside his dead friend. In Sector 5, Aerith pauses in the church where she tends her flowers. a sudden overwhelming sadness washing over her for reasons she cannot articulate. She does not know that Zack is dead, has no way to receive such information, but on some level deeper than conscious thought, she senses that something fundamental has changed, that someone important to her will not be coming back. She touches the pink ribbon in her hair, the one that matches the ribbon she gave to Zack years ago, and she mourns without understanding what she is mourning, grieving for loss that has not yet been confirmed, but which her heart somehow knows has occurred. The rain begins to fall over the wasteland, washing blood into soil, beginning the process of erasing evidence that anything happened here. Zack's body lies where it fell, abandoned and unmourned by anyone who knew his name, his sacrifice unknown to the world that continues without him. The hero who wanted to protect everyone, who believed in dreams and honor even when everything around him suggested such beliefs were naive, dies alone and forgotten. His only witness someone whose mind has fractured and who will forget or confuse the details of this moment. But the legacy endures. Cloud carries the Buster Sword toward Midgar, toward the church, where he will meet Aerith, toward the reactor bombing that will begin the chain of events that eventually saves the world from Shinra's exploitation and Sephiroth's madness. Everything that happens in Final Fantasy VII, every relationship formed and every battle fought, rests on foundation that Zack built through his choices and his sacrifice. He does not live to see any of it, does not know that his dreams will ultimately be fulfilled even if not by his own hands, does not understand that being a hero is not about recognition or glory, but about the difference you make for others even when no one remembers your name. The story of Crisis Core is the story of someone who tried so hard to be what the world needed, who maintained his essential goodness despite discovering that everything he believed was built on lies, who chose honor and compassion even when cynicism and self-preservation would have been easier. Zack Fair embodied the dreams and honor that Angel taught him, carried the Buster Sword as symbol of values that transcended personal survival, and died protecting someone who could not protect himself, giving his life so that Cloud might live and eventually become the hero Zack always wanted to be. It is a story about the price of loyalty and the cost of integrity in a world that punishes both. About maintaining hope when everything suggests hope is foolish. About fighting for what is right when victory is impossible. About leaving something worthwhile behind even when you will not survive to see its impact. Zack's dreams did not die with him in the wasteland. They lived on through Cloud and Aerith and everyone else whose lives he touched, rippling outward in ways he could never have anticipated, ultimately contributing to salvation of the entire planet from threats he helped to first uncover. The tragedy of Crisis Core is not that Zack dies. We know from the beginning that his story ends in the wasteland, but rather that he dies believing he failed. He does not know that Aerith will eventually help save the world, that Cloud will become the hero who defeats Sephiroth, that everything he did mattered in ways that would have made him proud if he could have witnessed them. He dies with unfulfilled promises and unachieved dreams, carrying guilt for everyone he could not save and every situation he could not resolve, not understanding that his impact extended far beyond what any individual could measure or predict. But perhaps that is what makes his story so powerful and so heartbreaking. Real heroism does not come with guarantees of success or assurance that your efforts will be recognized. It is doing what is right because it is right, protecting others because they need protection, fighting for a better world, even when you will not live to see it, leaving behind legacy not of glory or fame, but of simple goodness that echoes forward through time in ways you cannot control or anticipate. Zack Fair was a hero not because he defeated great enemies or accomplished impossible tasks, but because he maintained his humanity and his principles in circumstances designed to strip both away, because he cared about people when he could have chosen indifference, because he died protecting someone else when he could have saved himself. The Buster Sword that Cloud carries into Midgar is more than a weapon. It is a symbol of everything Zack believed and everything Angel taught him. It represents the idea that honor matters even when inconvenient, that dreams are worth pursuing, even when they seem impossible, that how you live matters more than how long you live, that the legacy you leave behind is measured not in accomplishments or recognition, but in how you affected others and what you inspired them to become. Each person who wielded that sword, from Angel to Zack to Cloud, carried those principles forward, sometimes successfully and sometimes not, but always trying to live up to ideals that transcended their individual circumstances. Crisis Core asks us to bear witness to a tragedy we cannot prevent, to watch someone we care about march toward destruction we know is coming, to feel the weight of inevitability pressing down on every moment of joy and connection and hope. It is a story designed to break our hearts, to make us care deeply about someone whose fate is sealed before the narrative even begins, to understand that sometimes the most heroic acts are those that go unrecognized and unrewarded, that save no one except the person being directly protected in that moment. But it is also a story about meaning and purpose, about how lives matter even when they are cut short, about how what we leave behind is more important than what we achieve for ourselves. Zack Fair lived 23 years, spent years of that as prisoner and experiment, and died alone in the dirt without achieving most of what he set out to accomplish. Yet his life mattered tremendously, not because of grand achievements or legendary status, but because of the people he touched and the values he embodied and the legacy he passed forward to someone who would carry it further than he could have imagined. In the final analysis, Crisis Core tells us that heroism is not about being the strongest or the most skilled or the one who defeats the final boss. It is about being kind when you could be cruel, about protecting others when you could save yourself, about maintaining principles when abandoning them would be easier, about trying to make the world better even when success is not guaranteed and recognition will never come. Zack Fair was a hero in the truest sense, not because of what he accomplished, but because of who he was and what he chose to value when everything else was stripped away. His story ends in the wasteland, but his legacy continues in the flower church, where Aerith tends blooms that should not exist, in the Buster Sword that Cloud carries, into battles that will determine the planet's fate, in the memories of everyone who knew him and was changed by knowing him. The puppy, who wanted to be a hero, succeeded beyond his own understanding, not through grand gestures or legendary combat, but through simple human decency maintained in circumstances that would have broken most people, through choosing love and loyalty and honor when cynicism and self-preservation were readily available alternatives. This is what Crisis Core teaches us, if we are willing to listen. That sometimes the most important stories are those of people who die before their time, whose dreams go unfulfilled, whose sacrifices go unrecognized, but whose lives nevertheless matter immensely because of how they lived rather than how long they lived or what they achieved. That heroism is not a destination, but a journey, not a final victory, but a series of choices about who you will be and what you will stand for when tested by circumstances beyond your control. Zack Fair chose to be a hero every day, in small ways and large, in moments of crisis and moments of calm. until the day he could no longer make any choices because his body failed and death claimed him. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything that matters. If you found yourself moved by Zack's journey, if you felt the weight of his sacrifice and the value of his legacy, consider sharing this story with others who might appreciate understanding where Cloud's journey truly began. Drop a comment about what Crisis Core means to you, about which moments hit hardest or which lessons resonated most deeply. And if you want to see more deep explorations of the stories that shape our understanding of what games can achieve as artistic medium, subscribe for future content that treats these narratives with the respect and attention they deserve. Zack Fair died believing he had failed. Let us remember him as the hero he actually was, whose dreams and honor live on in everyone whose life he touched, and everyone who hears his story and understands that true heroism requires no audience beyond your own conscience, and no reward beyond knowing you tried your best to leave the world a little better than you found it. His legacy is not the Buster Sword, or the battles he won, or the rank he achieved, but simply that he cared when he could have been indifferent, that he fought when he could have surrendered, that he gave his life protecting someone else when saving himself was equally possible. The wasteland where he fell becomes just another patch of empty ground, indistinguishable from the kilometers of barren soil surrounding Midgar. No marker to indicate what happened there or whose blood soaked into the earth. Within days, wind and weather erased the physical evidence of the battle, scattering shell casings and covering bloodstains, returning the landscape to its previous state of desolate emptiness. It is as though Zack Fair never existed, as though his final stand never occurred, the world continuing its rotation without pause or acknowledgement that something important ended in this forgotten place. But absence of physical memorial does not mean absence of impact. Cloud reaches Midgar carrying memories that are not entirely his own, personality constructed from fragments of Zack's stories and his own broken psyche. And in that confused state, he stumbles into the slums where fate arranges his meeting with Aerith in the church with yellow flowers. The same church where Zack fell years earlier, the same flowers he helped her tend. And when Cloud falls through the deteriorating roof in circumstances that mirror Zack's original entrance, the echo of past events creates resonance that neither participant fully recognizes, but both feel on some instinctive level. Aerith sees Zack in Cloud, not consciously, but in the way he moves sometimes, in certain expressions that cross his face, in the confidence he projects that seems both genuine and somehow borrowed. She is drawn to Cloud partly because of these echoes, these reminders of someone she loved and lost. And though she will eventually come to care for Cloud as himself, rather than as substitute for Zack, those initial moments of connection are built on foundation that Zack created through his relationship with her years before. The Buster Sword that Cloud wields so prominently, the oversized blade that should be impractical, but which he swings with surprising effectiveness, serves as constant visual reminder of Zack's legacy, even when no one present knows its full history. That sword traveled from Angel's father to Angel to Zack to Cloud, each transfer representing a moment of profound significance, each wielder trying to live up to ideals of dreams and honor that the weapon has come to symbolize. When Cloud eventually remembers the truth about his past, when Tifa helps him reconstruct his actual memories in the life stream, the Buster Sword will be there as physical evidence that Zack was real, that their friendship was genuine, that the legacy passed to him carries weight and responsibility he must honor. Tifa encounters Cloud in Midgar and immediately recognizes him as her childhood friend, though his claim to have been in Soldier confuses her because she remembers him only as infantry soldier, one of the nameless troops who supported soldier operations, but never achieved enhanced status himself. She does not challenge his version of events initially, wanting to believe that perhaps her own memories are flawed or incomplete, that maybe Cloud did achieve the dreams he expressed as a teenager before leaving Nibelheim. But doubts linger, inconsistencies accumulate, and eventually she will need to help him confront the truth about what actually happened during those missing years. The reactor bombing that begins Final Fantasy VII's main narrative, Cloud's participation in Avalanche's mission to strike against Shinra's Mako extraction, represents the start of a journey that will ultimately vindicate everything Zack believed and fought for. Cloud is not consciously honoring Zack's memory in those early missions, does not even remember Zack clearly due to his fractured psyche, but he is nevertheless carrying forward the principles that Zack embodied, fighting against Shinra's exploitation of the planet, protecting people who cannot protect themselves, standing up to corporate tyranny regardless of personal cost. These are the values that Zack would have embraced if he had survived to make his own choices free from soldiers' constraints. As Cloud's journey progresses and he gradually recovers his true memories, the role Zack played in his survival becomes increasingly apparent. The combat skills Cloud wields are genuine, enhanced by the Genova cells and Mako exposure from Hojo's experiments, combined with natural talent that was always present but never properly recognized or trained. The confidence and personality he projects are his own desperate construction, built from fragments of childhood dreams and stories he heard, his broken psyche creating functional identity from materials available when his actual self could not bear to remain conscious. The Genova cells do not dictate this false persona, but rather make it feel authentic, lending chemical coherence to psychological fiction, allowing Cloud to believe completely in memories that never happened. When the full truth finally emerges, when Cloud remembers the wasteland and Zack's death, and the legacy transferred with the Buster Sword, the revelation is simultaneously devastating and liberating. Devastating because it means confronting that his mind broke so completely it constructed entire false history to protect itself, that the confident soldier persona was his own desperate fiction rather than truth. But liberating because understanding that his psyche created this shield means he can finally dismantle it, can acknowledge his actual past, and build genuine identity from real experiences, rather than continuing to live inside protective delusion. Cloud can honor Zack's memory more meaningfully by being himself, by accepting that he was the infantry soldier who nevertheless acted with courage when it mattered, rather than continuing to inhabit the fantasy of being someone he never was. The scene of Cloud's breakdown in the livestream, where Tifa helps him sort through confused memories and separate truth from fiction his mind constructed, includes recollection of Zack's final moments. Cloud remembers his friend dying in the wasteland, remembers the words about living legacy and carrying dreams forward, and those memories become foundation for reconstructing stable sense of self. He understands now that he created a protective delusion to survive unbearable trauma, that his psyche built a fantasy soldier identity because the truth of being a failed infantry soldier was too painful to confront. But he also understands that Zack believed in him anyway, saw worth and potential that Cloud himself could not recognize, and died protecting the real Cloud Strife, not the fictional hero Cloud later imagined himself to be. This understanding transforms Cloud's approach to the rest of their quest. He continues fighting against Sephiroth and Shinra, continues working to prevent Meteor and save the planet, but now he does so as himself, rather than as constructed version of who he thought he should be. He wields the Buster Sword not as borrowed prop, but as genuine inheritance, legacy passed from friend to friend with explicit instructions about how to honor it. When Cloud faces Sephiroth in their final confrontation, he does so carrying Zack's dreams and honor alongside his own, fighting not just for himself or his friends, but for everyone who sacrificed so that he could be standing there in that moment. The victory over Sephiroth and the prevention of Meteor's impact represent culmination of trajectory that began with Zack's choices and sacrifice. Without Zack protecting Cloud in the wasteland, without the Buster Sword being passed forward, without the legacy of dreams and honor being explicitly transferred, the outcome might have been different. Cloud might not have survived to reach Midgar, might not have joined Avalanche, might not have been in position to oppose Sephiroth when the moment came. The chain of causation extends backward through every choice and every sacrifice, and Zack's place in that chain is foundational, even if the world never knows his name or acknowledges his contribution. Aerith's death at Sephiroth's hands creates another echo of Zack's sacrifice, another person dying to protect others and enable continuation of the struggle. When she falls with Masamune blade through her chest, when Cloud holds her body at the edge of the water, the parallel to Zack's death is structurally obvious, even if Cloud does not consciously recognize it in the moment. Both died trying to save the world. Both passed forward something essential that would eventually contribute to victory they would not live to witness. Both are mourned by those who survive, but whose sacrifice goes largely unacknowledged by the wider world. The difference is that Aerith's role is ultimately recognized and celebrated to some degree, her prayer activating Holy and her presence in the live stream helping guide the planet's defense against Meteor. Zack's contribution remains invisible, known only to Cloud and perhaps Tifa, once Cloud shares his full history with her. The rest of the world never learns about the soldier who died protecting an infantry soldier in the wasteland, never knows that the hero wielding the Buster Sword in their defense is carrying legacy passed from warrior they never heard of who died believing himself a failure. This invisibility of Zack's sacrifice makes it somehow more meaningful rather than less. He did not fight for recognition or glory, did not protect Cloud because he expected reward or acknowledgement, simply acted according to his values because those values mattered to him regardless of whether anyone else knew or cared. His heroism was pure in a way that is rare and precious, untainted by desire for recognition or fear that his efforts might go unappreciated. He was a hero for an audience of one, his own conscience, and that is the most authentic kind of heroism possible. Years after Meteor is prevented and the immediate crisis passes, Cloud establishes a delivery service operating out of Midgar's ruins, traveling across the world, carrying packages and messages, living quietly and trying to atone for sins he believes he committed during his time under Sephiroth's influence. He keeps the Buster Sword, but no longer carries it actively, instead mounting it in the church where Aerith tended her flowers, creating a memorial that honors both of the people whose deaths weigh most heavily on his conscience. The sword stands among yellow blooms, rust beginning to show on its edges, monument to dreams and honor and sacrifices that enabled Cloud's survival and the world's salvation. Sometimes Cloud visits the church and stands before the sword, speaking to Zack in his mind if not aloud, reporting on how he is trying to live up to the legacy he was given, asking forgiveness for the years when he could not remember or properly honor his friend's sacrifice. These conversations are private and one-sided. No supernatural response or confirmation that Zack hears or approves, but they provide comfort and structure for Cloud's ongoing attempt to be the person Zack believed he could become, to carry forward dreams and honor in ways that validate the faith his friend placed in him. The children who play in Midgar's ruins sometimes notice the sword in the church, ask Cloud about it, wonder whose weapon it was and why it merits such prominent display. He tells them it belonged to a hero, someone who saved his life and many others, someone who embodied everything a warrior should be. He does not provide details or full context, understanding that the complete story is too complicated and painful to share with curious children. But he ensures that Zack's existence is acknowledged, that at least a few people know that someone worthy of remembrance once wielded that blade. In this way, Zack Fair achieves a kind of immortality, not the grand recognition or legendary status he might have dreamed of in his youth, but something more modest and perhaps more valuable. He is remembered by the people whose lives he touched directly, honored by those who understand what he sacrificed and why it mattered. His legacy carried forward by someone who tries every day to be worthy of the faith placed in him. This is the immortality available to most people, not fame or monuments, but rather the impact we have on specific individuals who carry something of us forward into the future we will not see. The themes that Crisis Core explores through Zack's journey resonate beyond the specific narrative context. The question of identity and authenticity, how we construct ourselves from experiences and relationships, how trauma can fracture our sense of self. These are universal human concerns given particular urgency by the game's science fiction elements. Zack maintains clear sense of who he is despite discovering that much of what he believed about Soldier and Shinra was false, while Cloud loses his identity entirely and must painstakingly reconstruct it from fragments. The contrast highlights how fragile our self-conception can be, how dependent we are on accurate information about our own history and origins. The relationship between mentor and student, the way wisdom and values transfer across generations, forms another central theme. Angeal teaches Zack about dreams and honor, and Zack passes those lessons to Cloud, each iteration adapting the principles to new circumstances while maintaining their essential core. The Buster Sword travels the same path, physical symbol of intangible ideals, and his journey from Angeal's father to Cloud represents 4 generations of warriors trying to live according to principles that transcend individual circumstances or organizational loyalty. The corruption of institutions and the need to maintain personal integrity, regardless of what authorities demand or permit, provides social commentary that feels relevant beyond the game's fictional context. Soldier and Shinra present themselves as heroic organizations serving the greater good, but investigation reveals them to be fundamentally exploitative and criminal, willing to commit any atrocity if it serves corporate interests. Zack must navigate the cognitive dissonance of serving an organization whose values increasingly conflict with his own, eventually losing faith in the institution while maintaining his personal principles. His journey suggests that true heroism sometimes requires opposing the very systems that claim to represent heroic values, that blind loyalty to institutions is often moral failure rather than virtue. The treatment of mortality and legacy asks us to consider what we leave behind when we die, how our impact extends beyond our own awareness or control. Zack dies young, with much unaccomplished, but his influence ripples forward through Cloud and Aerith and everyone else he affected, ultimately contributing to outcomes he could never have predicted or imagined. The game suggests that our significance is not measured by what we personally achieve, but by how we affect others and what we inspire them to become. That legacy is built through relationship and principle, rather than through grand accomplishment or public recognition. The remake of Crisis Core, titled Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, updates the graphics and voice acting while maintaining the essential narrative unchanged. Modern players experiencing the story for the first time have advantage of better production values, but encounter the same emotional journey, the same trajectory from enthusiastic youth to tragic sacrifice. The remake introduces the story to a new generation of players who may never have played the original PlayStation Portable version, ensuring that Zack's tale continues to find audiences who need its lessons about heroism and sacrifice and maintaining principles in corrupt systems. The connection to the Final Fantasy VII Remake project adds additional layers of complexity and speculation. The remake of the original game introduces timeline manipulation and fate-defying elements that suggest the possibility of changing predetermined outcomes, and fans wonder whether this means Zack might survive in the remake continuity, whether his story might be given different ending that allows him to live and fight alongside Cloud and the others. These questions remain unresolved as of the current moment, but they speak to how much players want to save Zack, how strongly his character resonates, and how painful his death is, even for those who have experienced the story multiple times. Whether Zack deserves to be saved, whether changing his fate would improve or diminish the narrative, is question without clear answer. His death gives meaning to his life in ways that survival might complicate, making his sacrifice the defining moment that validates everything he believed and fought for. But the desire to see him live, to give him the future he earned through his decency and courage, is equally understandable and human. We want happy endings for people we care about, want their struggles to be rewarded rather than ending in wasteland execution. The tension between these positions reflects deeper questions about tragedy and storytelling, about whether some narratives gain power from their sad endings, or whether happy conclusions are equally valid and meaningful. What remains clear, regardless of future narrative developments, is that Zack Fair's story, as told in Crisis Core, is complete and powerful on its own terms. His journey from enthusiastic puppy to tragic hero, his relationships with Angel and Aerith and Cloud, his gradual discovery of Shinra's true nature, and his determination to maintain his principles despite that knowledge. All of this creates a character whose presence enriches the entire Final Fantasy VII universe. Understanding what Cloud lost when Zack died, knowing the person whose memories and personality fragments he absorbed, adds depth and poignancy to the original game's exploration of identity and trauma. The final moments of Crisis Core, the scene of Zack's death and his final words to Cloud, represent some of the most emotionally affecting content in gaming. The digital mindwave's failure, images of important people flickering and vanishing as his consciousness fragments, visualizes the process of dying in a way that is both abstract and visceral. The rain beginning to fall as Zack bleeds out, Cloud's awakening and acceptance of the Buster Sword, the quiet aftermath where one story ends and another begins. All of these elements combine to create sequence that stays with players long after the game concludes. The credits sequence, showing Cloud walking alone toward Midgar with the Buster Sword on his back, provides closure while opening into the beginning of Final Fantasy VII's main narrative. It is ending that is simultaneously conclusion and prologue. Zack's story finished, but its consequences just beginning to unfold. The musical theme that accompanies these final scenes, melancholic and beautiful, reinforces the bittersweet nature of what we have witnessed, celebrating Zack's life while mourning his death, acknowledging his sacrifice while recognizing that most of the world will never know what he did or why it mattered. This is what Crisis Core ultimately offers to those willing to engage with it. A story about someone who tried to be a hero in a world that did not deserve his goodness, who maintained his principles despite discovering that everything he believed was built on lies, who sacrificed himself to protect someone else when saving himself was equally possible. It is a story about legacy and memory, about how we live on through the people we affect and the values we transmit, about finding meaning in struggle even when the outcome is predetermined and tragic. Zack Fair deserved better than the ending he received. He deserved to see Aerith again, to become the mercenary he planned to be, to build the life he dreamed about during long journey across the world. He deserved recognition for his courage and sacrifice, deserved to know that his dreams would eventually be fulfilled, even if not by his own hands, deserved to live long enough to understand that he was exactly the hero he always wanted to become. But life is not fair, and heroism does not guarantee survival or reward, and sometimes the best people die young, while lesser individuals live to old age surrounded by comfort they do not merit. What Zack received instead was death in the wasteland, bleeding out while enemy army withdrew satisfied with their victory, his final act transferring legacy to someone who would eventually honor it. That is not the ending he deserved, but it is the ending that gives his story its power and its meaning, the conclusion that validates everything he stood for and everything he tried to teach through word and example. His death is tragedy, but tragedy that matters, loss that creates ripples extending far beyond the moment of his final breath. If his story moves you, if you find yourself wishing you could save him, or grateful that someone tried to tell his tale with the weight and respect it deserves, then his legacy has reached you too, across the years and through the medium of interactive narrative that asks you to walk alongside him on his doomed journey. Consider how you might embody the principles of dreams and honor in your own life, how you might maintain integrity when institutions and authorities suggest compromise, how you might leave behind legacy through the people you affect and the values you demonstrate, rather than through grand accomplishment or public recognition. Share this story with others who might benefit from understanding where Cloud's journey truly began, who might appreciate knowing about the hero who died so that others could live and fight and eventually prevail. Talk about what Crisis Core means to you, which moments resonated most deeply, how Zack's story affected your understanding of heroism and sacrifice, and the price of maintaining principles in corrupt systems. Subscribe for more explorations of stories that matter, that treat their characters and themes with seriousness they merit, that demonstrate what interactive narrative can achieve when creators commit to emotional honesty and thematic depth. Zack Fair lived 23 years. He spent 4 of those years as prisoner and experiment, subject to torture and violation that should have broken him, but somehow did not. He died alone in the wasteland, protecting someone who could not protect himself, believing he had failed at everything he set out to accomplish. But his life was not failure. His dreams were not naive fantasies. His principles were not weaknesses in world too corrupt to honor them. He was exactly what he tried to be, a hero in the truest sense, someone who cared when he could have been indifferent, who fought when he could have surrendered, who gave everything, including his life for people and principles that mattered more to him than his own survival. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything.